Welcome back to the channel. I've got a little box thing on this screen that's like over my head. I hope it's not, you guys can't see it in the video and it's just this end because it is super annoying. So I don't know how to fix that. So hopefully it's just this side. As I've just said in my other video, I'm really not feeling too good. But this can come and go with my health thing, so all of a sudden I feel really like fluey and awful. Anyway, hopefully this too shall pass. So, the Dance of the Goddess. We are reading from The Return of the Gods. So let's go ahead and get straight into it, guys. One of the strangest concepts in the lore of the goddess is summed up in the phrase the Dance of Ishtar. The strange thing about it is what it signified: war and destruction. It was a peculiar juxtaposition. The image of a dancing goddess, against a backdrop of carnage, death and devastation. An ancient inscription invokes the concept. Fiery glow that blazes against the enemy, who wreaks destruction on the fierce dancing one, Ishtar, who masses the multitude. Don't you always find that interesting? Because people that are like singers and stuff, they always have like fire blazing behind them, like on the, not always, but majority, if you go and see like them in concert, they've always got like fire burning behind them or some kind of destruction. So interesting. The Dance of Ishtar. On the opening night of the Stonewall riots, a strange thing happened. In the midst of the uprising, fighting, several of those involved began performing a dance. It was a bizarre convergence of music and dance performance on one hand, violence and destruction on the other. It was the Dance of Ishtar. In ancient Mesopotamia, it was not only the goddess who bore the title of the Dancing One. Her priests, the Asinu, were also known for their dances. So in the midst of the Stonewall uprising, Ishtar's modern-day Asinu performed a dance. It was also the ministry of ancient Asinu to sing the goddess's sacred songs. So those who danced at Stonewall also sang a song. As the ancient Asinu would sing their songs in female dialect as if they were women, so their modern counterparts at Stonewall likewise sang their song and danced as if they were women. Lovely locks, joy girls, and harlots. When Ishtar stood on the city wall and called down curses on Gilgamesh, she summoned her female ministers that they might share in her anguish. 3 different kinds of women were mentioned in the account. One translation renders them as the cultic women of lovely locks, joy girls, and harlots. All 3 were associated with prostitution. The first of the 3 mentioned was known in the original language as Kezatu. Kezatu, I'm assuming Kezatu or Kezatu, were closely joined to Ishtar. The goddess's home city, Uruk, was known as the city of Kezatu. They served in Ishtar's temples, and aside from their association with prostitution, the Kezatu were known for making music. An ancient Sumerian tablet speaks of a girl who acted like a Kezatu, sang songs and played games. The Kezatu, one writer observes, would be involved in a variety of tasks including singing, playing instruments and dancing. The Kezatu. They who wear their hair in curls. Another writer notes of the Kezatu. The women have distinctive hairdos, sing songs and dance in cultic performances. Accordingly, the Kezatu were especially ordained to sing songs and dance the dances of Ishtar. As for their distinctive hairdos, the reason the earlier cited translation was rendered the Kezatu as the lovely locks is because of the word Kezatu itself. Comes from the root word kezaru, which means to curl one's hair. So Kezatu most specifically translates to and speaks of the women of Ishtar's court who wore their hair in curls. The Dancing Girls. On the opening night of the Stonewall riots, accompanying the goddess's manifestation was the manifestation of Kezatu. In some translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh, Ishtar's summon of the Kezatu was rendered this way. Ishtar called together her people, the dancing and singing girls. Her dancing and singing girls in another translation of Kezatu on the night of Stonewall. The goddess again called together her dancing and singing girls. Those engaged in the dance had no idea, but it was as if the spirit of the Kezatu had taken over them. They were men, but now they became as women. Dancing women, singing girls. Their song was lewd taunt of the police officers, but the lyrics were most significant. They began, "We are the Stonewall girls," and then came the words that stretched back to the Akkadian of ancient Mesopotamia, and to the goddess they sang, "We wear our hair in curls." In the Akkadian tongue, it was equivalent to saying, "We are the Kezatu." And so it was that on the night of Stonewall, with the return of the goddess, the Kezatu, the dancing girls who wore their hair in curls, also returned. And as the dance of Ishtar went on, the crowd was driven into a frenzy. It was now that the riot became so dangerous that the police retreated and barricaded themselves inside the bar. At that, the spirit of the goddess grew even more furious. The elements of the ancient mystery were converging. The dance of the goddess was coalescing with battle and destruction. I don't know why I got so confused there. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm not feeling great. "I shall smash the door." The goddess and her people were locked out of Stonewall, but this was the goddess who refused to be kept out of any realm because of a closed gate or locked door. Her ancient inscriptions describe her threats to bring violence against the gates and doors that would not open to her. "If you do not open the gate for me to come in, I shall smash the door and shatter the bolt. I shall smash the doorposts and overturn the doors." The goddess had come to the gate of America. Now she would smash in the door. Possessed by her spirit, the mob began pounding and pummeling the bar's front door, attempting to shatter, smash, and break it open to get the police officers inside. Stonewall was her dwelling place, her Eshtam. She would not be locked out. Lady of Fire. Ishtar was also the goddess of fire. An ancient hymn celebrates her use of the element to bring destruction in battle. "Raining blazing fire down upon the land, lady who rides upon a beast, destroyer of the foreign lands, you confer strength on the storm, their great gateways are set afire." So now, inflamed by the Lady of Fire, the crowd attempted to light the bar on fire with the police inside. They squirted lighter fluid through the openings in the doorway and threw burning pieces of garbage, lighted projectiles, and firebombs towards the police officers. They doused the front door with lighter fluid and set it on fire as well. One eyewitness summed up the intent of the mob with 4 simple words: they wanted to kill. Some would consider it strange that such things as made up Stonewall would from that day forward be celebrated throughout the world, but even that goes back to ancient mystery. The goddess's works of fire, destruction, and fury were likewise celebrated by her worshippers and lauded in her hymns. Signs of the goddess. That night, the signs of the goddess converged upon each other. The gate, the Eshtam, the stone wall, the prostitutes, the cross-dressers, the homeless, the revived Asinu, the lion's head, the raging avatar named Stormy, Stormy, the arresting, the call to help and its response, the Kezatu, the dance of the goddess, the battle, the smashing of the door, the employing of fire, the fury and the storm. The goddess had returned. The door she had violently pounded that night appeared only to be that of a bar, but was the door of civilization that had been closed to her. She had now forced it open. She would not rest or cease from her pounding until all the doors of Western civilization were likewise forced open to her. And with the door opened, the other gods and spirits cast out in ancient times would likewise return. We have seen how the place of the explosion and the goddess's return, the city, the ground, the very site of Stonewall were all determined by the ancient mystery. It had to happen where it happened, but what about its timing? Beyond where it happened, could there be an ancient mystery that determined when it happened? In other words, did it happen when it had to happen? Could the timing of the explosion at Stonewall have been determined by an ancient mystery involving the moon, the sun, the ancient calendar of Babylon, and the casting off of an incantation? Let me just see if I can read any more. Let's do another chapter, guys. The moon, the sun, and the spell. Could the timing of the explosion at Stonewall have been determined by a mystery from ages past involving the moon, the sun, the ancient calendar of Babylon, and the casting off of an incantation? The time of passion and anguish. Ishtar's lover was the shepherd Tammuz. One day Tammuz offended her. The goddess set a horde of demons upon him. He tried to flee, but they caught up with him and brought him down to the land of the dead. After his departure, the goddess, in remorse, began mourning him. Her sorrow and anguish were so great that nature itself stopped bearing life. Her maidens mourned with her. Finally, she descended to the land of the dead and brought him back to the world of the living, where she could dwell for part of the year before returning to the dead. When were the days of Ishtar's mourning and anguish? They were days of summer. It was then that the Middle Eastern earth dried up and the leaves and fruit withered away, the sign of Tammuz's death and the separation of the two lovers. The days of Tammuz. But it was more specific than that. The days of Ishtar's sorrow fell within a specific month. The month was so closely connected to the goddess and her cult that it bore the name of her lover. It was the month of Tammuz. The month of Tammuz was specially joined to the mythological realm. It marked the capture of the goddess's lover, his death, his descent, and dwelling in the land of the dead. It was the month when the two gods were separated from each other. For the goddess, it was the month of unfulfilled longings, unanswered passions, and desires denied. It was the month of the goddess's sorrows, her longings and desires, her frustrations, her tears and anguish. When did Stonewall take place? It happened in the ancient month of Tammuz. It was all part of the mystery of the gods that what happened at Stonewall took place in the ancient month of Tammuz. It was no accident that Ishtar's return would take place in the month named after her lover and so deeply interwoven with her worship. Nor was it an accident that the replaying of her mythology at Stonewall should happen in the month most saturated with her mythology. If the frustration and anguish that exploded into Stonewall were driven by the spirit of the goddess, then it is all the more striking that it happened during the very days devoted to her anguish and frustration. She was separated from and denied the object of her desires. The month's very name Tammuz stood for the denied object of her desires. So the days of Stonewall were the days of Tammuz, and the uprising was likewise born of frustration and the denial of desire. The descending of the sun. In 1969, the month of Tammuz commenced on June 17, 11 days from Stonewall, one of the most important days on the calendar of the gods and pagan world was that of the summer solstice, when the sun begins its annual descent. It was a time of rituals, worship, and sacrifices. The summer solstice was one of the most highly charged times of pagan year, and in the case of Ishtar, the sun's descent paralleled the descent of her lover Tammuz into the underworld. In 1969, the sun began its annual descent on June the 21st. It was just days before the events that would set everything in motion, and exactly 7 days to Stonewall, daughter of the moon, and the 15th day. Ishtar was strongly connected to the moon. In several of her mythologies, her father is identified as the moon god. She herself was known as the first daughter of the moon. Since the Mesopotamian and Middle Eastern calendars were lunar-based, each month began with the new moon, which reached its fullness around the 15th day. The month's center point, the day of its full moon. In the Babylonian world, it was a holy day called the Shapatu, or Sharpatu. I'm really not good at pronunciation. Ishtar was called the she of the 15th day, the mother of the month. In 1969, the month of Tammuz, the month of Ishtar's passion, came to a full moon on the weekend that began on June the 27th and ended on June the 29th. It was the weekend of Stonewall. The riots began just before the full moon and continued just after it. The Stonewall riot centered on the full moon and the center point of Tammuz. It was no accident that the movement that would alter the lines of sexuality and gender was birthed in the month named after the lover of the goddess who altered the lines of sexuality and gender, and the days of that birth would cluster around the full moon of that month. The separation of man and woman. Tammuz was the month of separation of Tammuz and Ishtar, the month that separated the male and female. Thus the movement that would promote a sexuality in which male was separated from female and female separated from male was born in the month that separated the male from the female and the female from the male. The movement would advance and celebrate the turning of men away from women and the turning of women away from men. The spell. The day that sealed Stonewall and all that would come from it was June the 26th, 1969. It was then that the Deputy Police Inspector Seymour Pine obtained search warrant number 578. That was the definitive act that would set in motion the raid that would spark the riots, the uprising, and then the movement. It was in that one act that everything was sealed. When was it? When was the warrant issued and the event that would become Stonewall sealed? On the ancient Mesopotamian and biblical calendar, it took place on the 10th day of the month of Tammuz. Is there any significance to that day? There is. An ancient Babylonian text reveals it. The 10th of Tammuz is the day given to perform the spell to cause a man to love a man. Interesting. So the day that would seal Stonewall and launch the movement that would come of it was not only one of the days of Tammuz and Ishtar, but the specific day ordained from ancient times to cast a spell to make a man love a man. The month of Tammuz, the full moon, the summer solstice, the separation of male and female, the days of frustration and anguish, the day of the ancient spell to cause a man to love a man, all come together in the summer of 1969 to prepare the way for a goddess and ignite an explosion. It was the beginning. What happened at Stonewall would rapidly begin radiating into the surrounding culture, sparking a movement and then a metamorphosis. It would act as a catalyst to the overturning of Christian civilization, the foundations of biblical morality, and the near-universal standards that had undergirded most civilizations for most of its recorded history. It would bring that which had inhabited the shadows into the mainstream and then into dominion. But behind the metamorphosis, its spectacles, its signs and symbols, its landmarks and seminal events, its celebrations, rites and sacraments were mysteries of ancient origins. Behind them all were the gods. Those are the mysteries we will now uncover. We begin with the festal processions of Sumer and the gates of Babylon. And then the next part is dominion. And that chapter, Processions of the Gods. So that is your next instalment of that book, guys. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm so sorry about me getting my words jumbled up and stuff. I'm extremely tired and feeling under the weather. So hopefully that will pass. And thank you so much for bearing with me. And I really do appreciate it. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Thank you so much, guys. I will see you all soon.